So my name is Angela Bartholomew, and if you would have told me 3 years ago that I would be involved in honeybees, I would have told you you were crazy. All I do is eat honey. I don't know anything else about honeybees. But then I became aware of a honeybee colony that was inside of a large cracker shack. It was a very old structure, old house, tongue roof pine for any of you that like that kind of stuff. And it was buried in a very wooded area up in the county north of us. And when it was brought to my attention, I said, what are you going to do about it? They were clearing this property out in order to build a housing development. And so I said, well, what's going to happen to that? And they said, well, we move the workers to the other side for the next week or two until we get somebody out there, I guess, to spray them. And I was just like, well, that can't be right. For 22 years before I retired, I was a critical care flight paramedic, so caring for people and things is kind of in my DNA. And so I thought, well, surely there's a way we can save these bees. This seems kind of harsh. So down the rabbit hole I went until like 3 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, oh, you can move honeybees. That is a thing. And so then I thought, well, let me figure out how to do this. I know I have to have a hive, so I right down the rabbit hole. Let me figure out what hive and how I put them in that. So of course I had to get the best hive possible from Australia that ended up being way more than I needed. And I built it because, that's what girls do. And I put it together and I thought, well, I got to figure out how to get them in here. So let me look online and see if there's a beekeeper club or something where people could teach me how to go do this. And lo and behold, there was. At that time, this organization was called the Beekeepers Association in Southwest Florida. And I met Dennis and Jennifer in Virginia there. I walked into that meeting. It meets at the Botanical Garden. We still meet there over by the Edison Estates. And I stood up, hi, my name is Angela. I know nothing about honeybees. It's not possible to know less about honeybees than I do. But I have this honeybee colony, and I would like to save them, so I thought maybe you guys could teach me some tricks of the trade so I don't make a bunch of mistakes. And Dennis told me that night, well, you just need to get bees. I said, no, I'm not ready for bees. I really am not being silly. I know nothing about them. He said, the only way you learn is you've got to get them. So that was on a Thursday evening, and Saturday morning he reached out to me and said, I have a honeybee colony for you. So you want me to bring it to you today or tomorrow? And I thought, well, I guess we're going to do this. So he has been my dear friend and mentor, as have Jennifer and Miss Virginia, for the last 3 years as I've grown in this journey. And we did go and move those honeybees. It was 3 years ago on 4th of July, on Independence Day, that we rescued that entire colony. That colony still is alive and well at my apiary in North Fort Myers, doing famously. So I'm very thankful for that. Since then, I have rescued over 17 feral colonies. Don't tell the state of Florida that. So I have rescued over 17 colonies, and I keep those at the apiary. I also have some honeybees that we got from local honeybee farms and queen breeders here locally. The one that I usually use is Queen Bee Connection out of LaBelle. They do a great job, so I have a mix of those bees at the apiary as well. But that's kind of how I got into beekeeping. Fast forward, I am in the Master Beekeeper program through the University of Florida. Recently progressing through that program, love it. It's been a wealth of information, and I'm very thankful to have the opportunity to share some of that with you. The video series I'm going to show you today, I picked this video not only because it's a really great brief overview of honeybees and kind of some of the probably more interesting facts about them that you may or may not know, but also because the University of Florida has what's called the UF Honeybee Lab video series online. They're very short, maybe 5 to 10 minutes long at the most. And if you're looking to learn a little bit more interesting facts, especially for the little ones, it's a short thing, 5-10 minutes and you're out. It's not like it's a very intense lecture, but I think you would all find some of that very interesting material if you have a thirst for it beyond this. Sound good? So I'm going to play that for you, and do you want me to turn this off, or is this going to feedback when I hit play?
Might as well turn it off, yeah.
We'll turn this off for just a minute. We'll play this video and then we'll come back and answer some questions and talk more about honeybees. Does that sound good? All right.
The honeybee colony is a true marvel of biology. And in this series, I'm going to introduce you to the colony, its constituents, the nest, and everything that you need to know from the biology perspective about being a successful beekeeper. So let me first start by describing a little bit of semantics between a colony and a hive or a nest. A honeybee colony is a term for the actual living organisms. Honeybees are insects, and they go through complete metamorphosis. So you have egg, larva, pupa, and adult. Collectively, the bees compose the colony. When I say the word colony, I am talking about the living organisms that live and function almost as a single unit. Now, colonies live in nests or hives. Beekeepers tend to refer to the structure in which a colony lives as the hive, but in the wild we often refer to that as their nest. So the nest or the hive is the structure in which the colony resides. Now, the honeybee colony is fascinating. There's a suite of behaviors. There's multiple members. There's multiple life stages. So as I zero in, I want to think specifically about the three types of bees that collectively compose that honeybee colony. Those bees are the queen, the drones, and the worker bees. Each of those bees, the queens, the drones, and the workers, go through that developmental stage of egg, larva, pupa, adult. And in this series about honeybee biology, I'll be explaining to you those stages, how they work, what happens as bees progress through them. But for purposes of this video, it's just important to know that the colony typically has one queen, maybe a few thousand drones, and then many thousand workers, perhaps 10 to 20 to 30 to 40,000 or more workers. Queens and workers are female bees, while the drones are male bees. And there's this really interesting thing that happens in the colony that's responsible for producing males or females. And that interesting thing is something we call a haplodiploid sex determinant system. Big, fancy science word. But what it simply means is that the sex, male or female, is determined by a haplodiploid genetic system. So what do I mean by that? Well, queen honeybees are the individuals in that nest who lay the eggs and are responsible for all of the offspring in that nest. When a queen lays an egg, she can elect to fertilize that egg with semen or not fertilize that egg. And a remarkable thing within this haplodiploid sex determinant system is that unfertilized eggs result in male bees, drones, while fertilized eggs result in female bees, queens, and workers. So the queen, as she lays that egg, is determining whether to make that offspring a male or a female. Drones, by extension, because they're from unfertilized eggs, have no fathers. It only took a queen to make him. Drones do, though, have grandfathers. They have a maternal grandfather. It took a male to make the queen, but once the queen existed, no male to make that drone. Workers and queens, on the other hand, come from these fertilized eggs. So when the queen is laying that egg, she'll fertilize it and you'll get this female. But what's remarkable about the female division in the honeybee world is that the queen doesn't really determine if she's going to lay a queen egg or a worker egg. She only determines that she's going to lay a female egg. The worker bees in the nest then take that female larvae and either feed it a lot of high quality diet or less low quality diet to make a queen and a worker respectively. And then once that's determined, those eggs hatch with larvae, those larvae develop into pupae, the pupae develop into adults, and then you have adult queens, workers, or drones. A remarkable system where three different types of bees coming from two different types of eggs work together to advance the colony while living in a defined nest. A remarkable system that I look forward to introducing to you in subsequent videos.
All right, pretty fascinating, right? Pretty fascinating. He's going to just put up some video working on frame, just so you can kind of have that to look at while we talk. There's a couple things I want to talk about. It's kind of interesting. They talked about the difference in female bees and male bees. The interesting thing is that who in the room has ever been stung by a honeybee? Anyone? Not a wasp. It's not the same thing. Honeybee. Okay. Most of the time you step on them, right, when you're walking through. Okay. If you've ever been stung by a honeybee, 100% that was a female honeybee. The male honeybees do not have a stinger. They do not defend or protect the hive at all. They do not forage and bring back resources to the colony. They only exist to spread the genetics of that particular queen into the environment. That is the only reason that they exist. And they only exist or are present in the hives during certain times of year when that colony will have the desire to swarm and start a new one. Remember, honeybees exist to live and to spread honeybees throughout the world. That's what they do. So certain times a year, when the resources are abundant in the environment, they will decide to start new colonies. And in that situation, when they're trying to start new colonies, they're hatching out new queens, they need male bees during that time of year. However, in the fall and winter, we're not doing that. There's not plentiful resources in the environment, so our need, as a honeybee superorganism, our need for male bees drops. In that situation, the females in the hive will start to drag all of the males out and kick them out of the colony. So they will drag them all out. We literally will see on the front landing board of our hives, we see female worker bees with other male bees, and they are biting their legs and dragging them out. They have no use for them anymore. If the males try to come back, sometimes they will shoot their eyes out so they cannot find their way back home. So these women are very serious about that. One of the other things that I find interesting, any questions about the male honeybees? Question about male honeybees? No? Don't want to be one? Right? Okay. Now, the females, let's talk about that. There can only be one queen. Only and ever be one queen. Except, because of course it's nature, there's always an except. That is not a honeybee, that is a wasp, sir. For the record, I have no control of those. Just leave you So the females, you're going to either have a worker bee or you will have a queen honeybee. There can only be one queen. So what happens when they go to start a new colony? What will happen is that queen, the original queen, will leave with a third of the colony to go start a new one. Okay? When she does that, there's some preparation that happens. The colony itself knows that it's getting ready to swarm. They're feeling very confident. The environment is abundant with resources. They have stocked the pantry inside the hive because they know we're getting about a third of our manpower force is getting ready to leave. So they are prepared. The queen will lay eggs. The worker bees inside that colony decide swarming is happening. So they start to raise what we call our queen cells. This is an egg that got laid like every other egg. The only difference is that at about 3 days, they stop feeding all the eggs royal jelly and feed them a less nutrient-dense food source. However, the queen cells get fed royal jelly only and always for their entire lives, which is why the queens are fed that high nutrient density food. And it's the difference that why a worker bee, a regular female worker bee, is going to live an average of 30 days, and the queens will live 3 to 5 years. And the only difference in why the queens live longer is they are exclusively fed their entire lives from royal jelly. Who can tell me where royal jelly comes from? Does anybody know that? And don't say Publix. Whole Foods. It's not it. Royal jelly is excreted from the head of the worker bees. And that is the place that it comes from. So we talk about honeybees that they eat pollen, and honeybees eat nectar, but the queen honeybees eat only royal jelly, and that all eggs in that colony when they are laid get only royal jelly for the first 3 days. So an interesting thing is that she eats from the secretion on the head of her worker bees 24/7. That is their job. She has attendants always, and that's what they feed her. So let's say that these queens decide we're going to start a new colony. The worker bees decide they're going to raise queen cells. What happens is when you look up here, you'll see that some of these cells are capped over. That's a baby bee underneath there that's getting ready to grow. And you'll see the flat ones are worker. That's going to hatch out a female. You'll see some of them are kind of dome shaped. That's going to hatch out a male. And then if we don't have any in here, but if it was a queen cell that was growing, it would look like a peanut, like an actual peanut, stuck to the front of this frame. That's what they look like. So we know that the hive is thinking about swarming when we, as beekeepers, open that up and we see 5, 6, 7, sometimes a lot more, little peanuts hanging everywhere. We know what that is. Those are queens growing. If you remember in the beginning, I said there can only be one queen in the colony. So why do they have so many? Why would they try to raise so many queens at one time? Well, because they like to hedge their bets. These are really smart like that. And what happens is that queen leaves, the original queen with a third of the colony. The next thing that happens is kind of like it's a fight to the death to see which of these new queens is going to hatch out and take over. The first bee that hatches out will pipe or call to her sisters. And it kind of sounds like a beep, 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 like that. It's like their battle cry. Her sisters will have no ability to stop. They can't help themselves. They will respond from inside their little peanut, right? She will walk across the frames. She will go through that entire colony and every fan if it's out in the wild or on these frames. And she will find each one of her sisters and sting them and kill them. There can only be one. Once she kills it, the worker bees inside the hive will break it down, chew it up, get rid of it. Now let's say that more than one queen hatches at a time. So now it's a sister on sister war battle, right? Still the same thing. It's a fight to the death. There can only be one winner. That's it. And that's how it works. So it's not exactly what people think. I don't think that you realize that that's how it works. It's a little bit brutal, but that is how they survive. They take it very seriously. Any questions about queen bees? Yes.
If you said you open the hive and if you see there's a bunch of queens that have been laid and you know they're going to swarm, what can you do to stop them from swarming?
If we don't want them to swarm, as beekeepers, sometimes we don't want that to happen because we don't want it to set the colony back, especially if it's before a nectar flow. What we would prefer is that they all stay home. We don't want to lose a third of the workforce and drop our honey production. You can take those queen cells off. And sometimes what you can do is add extra boxes and kind of set them back beforehand. Ultimately though, if you were to say, if anybody were to tell you that you can 100% stop swarming, it's not true. The honeybees have an instinct in them, there's nothing you can do about it, but you can convince them sometimes that it's not the right time to do it. So we do things like that. Sometimes we'll take those queen cells, break them off, split that colony up, give them that queen cell to finish raising her, and then keep this original colony together. That's also something that we can do.
You can do that without having a queen, a real live queen in that.
Every colony needs a real live queen. Now, if we have those queen cells, we would do the same thing. If I looked in there, we wanted to try to stop these guys from swarming, and I was going to split that colony to do it, I would split the colony off, divide them in half. Half of them would stay here with the original queen. The other half goes into this. I would put multiple. Any of those queen cells that they have, I would take and give them multiple chances to find it. What will happen is when that queen hatches out, or they have to fight to the death, and then that one queen is there. She is a virgin queen. They do not emerge mated. She will have to go on mating flights, right? Now, when she gets to the point where she's ready to go on a mating flight, they've already gotten rid of all the other sisters. There's nobody else that's going to be taking over. She will go on mating flights over a few days, a period of a few days, multiple flights in a day, and up to 5 to 7 miles. Honeybees do not mix their genetics with their own. They have no incestuous nature. So what happens is the queen knows how far her sons are going out every day trying to mate the virgin queens. She will purposely fly much farther past that so that she gets genetics that are not her own and comes back. She will do that over several days, up to 5 to 7 miles away, multiple times a day. Usually leaves a little after like noon. That's kind of like the high time for them to go. A lot can happen during that time. She can get hit by a windshield, cross them the periwinkle way. She can get eaten by a bird, eaten by a dragonfly. A storm could blow up in the middle of the afternoon and blow her off course. All of those things are possible. The fact that they're able to do this as successfully as they are, even in the wild without keepers, is pretty remarkable. Very remarkable. It's a great question. Thank you. Anyone else? One question? Yes.
The royal jelly that comes out of their
From their
heads,
mandibles, yeah.
does that hurt them or no?
It does not.
Okay, so
That's the normal way that they feed their young and the normal way that they feed their queen. When we take queens, in fact, and we move them or we order queens online, they ship them in the U.S. mail. There's a little white envelope, it says live bees on it. If they stick it right, they're not supposed to put it in their box. But they do sometimes. But they pack that queen in a little queen cage. You have a little wooden? Yes. So they will put them in these little cages, put it in an envelope and ship it to us. I've had queen bees come from Canada. And they'll ship them to us with 5 to 6 other female bees. Those 5 to 6 bees will just feed her constantly. So she is constantly attended. There's never a time that you will find a queen that is not attended. Let's say this queen somehow got out in the wild and she needed to be fed. I've had new queens that hatched out, and I found one on the ground, and the colony in front of me was trying to kill her. I wasn't sure exactly where she came from, but I picked her up, got her away from this colony, walked her across the apiary, and just had her in a little queen clip, not this, and just held it up for a few minutes. Foraging bees cannot help but be attracted to her pheromone and want to take care of her. They cannot help it. So I just held it and waited for bees to come get on her. It took maybe 10 minutes for her to be covered in bees, and I put her into a container, and then she was safe, and I knew she would be fed, and there was no rush. I could make the hive to put her in. So that's what they do. They enjoy it. They're compelled to do it. It does not hurt them. It's no different than how mammals feed their kids. Any other questions? Yes.
So when the male bees are kicked out, do those males then essentially die?
They will.
Okay.
Yeah. They'll have to fend for themselves until they finish their lifespan or die because they can't fend for themselves. Yeah. It is what it is, right? You don't bring home bacon, I'm not frying it up in the pan. That's how it's up. Good, those were good questions. How are we on time? Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
It's illegal to have bees on Sanibel.
It is legal to have bees on Sanibel unless you live in a community that has like an HOA that restricts it. But the state of Florida came out several years ago, and basically you're allowed to have honeybees anywhere you live in the state of Florida. You have a legal right to do that unless you live in a community that restricts it.
I had, about 20 years ago, I had bees in Minnesota. I'm still bringing a hive down. I was told I could not have them.
Yeah. Dennis, do you know when that law changed? He said 20 years ago. It's
It's been the last 12 years.
in the last 10 to 12 years that law changed. But it's a state law, so it doesn't matter if you live in Sanibel, Fort Myers, Cape Coral, Lehigh, West Palm. Again, it's just if your community restricts it for any reason, there's nothing you can do about that. But as long as you don't have a community that restricts it, then you absolutely by law have a right to have them. Great question. Any other ones? So I'm going to let Dennis and Jennifer come up and talk about some beekeeping things. I'll still be here for some Q&A afterwards, and I just thank you for coming, and I thank you for your time, and I thank you for loving honeybees. So thank you.
This one might work. Is it working? Now it's working. Okay. I'm not going to take away from anything, I'm just going to add to what she talked about drones and how they're males and they're ugly and fat and don't do much. And you can see that they are truly ugly. That's a male.
This is why drones need us, ladies.
Yes. In a short time before she chews my eyes out. Some people say they actually look like a roach, but the girls, on the other hand, they're undeniably cute. Girls are cute. They're feeding each other, they're sharing and they're tasting things. And she talked about the queen and the distinguished differences on queens and stuff. If you happen to see one over there, she doesn't have a spot on her. You can see that her wings appear shorter, but they're not really shorter. It's just that her abdomen is longer. So that's the way you find her. Usually, sometimes you can see something with shorter wings, and oh yeah, there's a queen. Also, her attendants that Angela mentioned take care of her all the time. She can't do anything without them. They usually face her in some way, so if you do connect the dots, sometimes you can connect their eyeballs, and she'll be in the center of the circle. For those that have a hard time finding the queens, some people paint them, but that serves a dual purpose. It's not really for making it easy for you to see them, but each year has a different color. This year is white, and our queen in there is marked white in the observation hive. But you can see that's a lot easier to find in a hive if it's marked, but you can also see the eyes are going around in a circle on it too. Again, some of the things that bees do, they're important for, like she said, 1/3 of every bite of food that you take, and they do that through pollination. And their equipment for pollination is really intelligently designed. They have the baskets to collect the pollen in on their legs. They're also electrostatically charged where the pollen jumps onto the hairs so that they go from bees to bees and they pollinate that way. As far as seeing things in the hive, it's very difficult to see anything in there because it's dark. but the egg is so very, very small that the queen lays. Yes, and this, the egg in relationship to that little cell way down in the bottom, the tiny egg, and then this slowly develops. And it's open, so you can see down in and see all of this with your naked eye. But then when it gets 8 days old, they put a little brown cap over it, and that's when it's pupated. So you won't be able to see that in the observation hive.
How many days old?
At 8 days, they cap, and then it goes until 21 days, and then it'll emerge as a full-size bee. It's not really small or baby bee. You also mentioned royal jelly. The substance in the bottom, and this is royal jelly in there, some milky white stuff. I think it's still sold in health food stores and stuff that you can take. It's a very nutritious product to take for health and stuff. And when you talked about the peanuts that you find in there, those peanuts would be hanging on the frame like that. So that's the queen larva, the royal jelly, and then I'm going to let just briefly on this. Some people ask what they can do to help the bees because they know the bees are in trouble. And 2025 is like the worst year in beekeeping history in the United States and the world, where they lost more bees colonies in the year 2025, and we're still struggling to recover. So the Forest State Beekeepers came up with a way to fund research for the bees. And these are now available through DMV. When you go to renew your plate, you can ask for the Save the Bees plate. I pay $33. That extra $33 goes for research and scholarships and all kinds of things related to bees. And it has more impact than buying $33 worth of seeds and planting them in your garden. It's also a good thing. But it's just that the bees need millions and millions of flowers to affect them. It's just not enough that you can support bees through extra forage. It's always welcome and good. But this lets it go to people like Jamie Ellis was on there in the beginning talking about bees and the honey lab. So if you purchase those, which are available, some people ask about getting into beekeeping. Angela mentioned how easy it was for her. You just have to walk up to me and then all of a sudden you become
I
an
don't know how
expert.
easy it was when we
Just an
had
expert. Yeah. Right.
you
See,
did.
you got honey within months of it for that bees. But you use products like this. She talked about an expensive product, which is automatic when you see where you turn a spout and then you squirt out honey. But this is the realistic. Been around for hundreds of years. And we use wooden frames for able to manipulate and inspect and do things. So that's a typical hive. That's a real hive. Products of the hive, there's a propolis that they glue them down with, which when people think of bees, they think of honey and wax, but they don't think of propolis. Propolis is in the health food stores, also in tincture. You spray it on the throat. It's the sanitizer of the hive that keeps it sterile like a hospital. So it's such a good antimicrobial product, and I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer to add her 2 cents and all this and what to look for in here and anything else.
So I'm actually going to pass around 2 what used to be live bees, one of which, the bigger one, easier to remember, that's your queen, and your smaller one, that's your longer, remember, both are female. But if you have an aversion to bees, or sometimes even our experienced beekeepers, these can be a little bit difficult to see inside the hive. So a really great way to actually put them in your hands and kind of look closely, and then if you have any questions from there. But basically, does anybody have any questions about our equipment or management that we do on bees?
Why do you use smoke?
Does anybody know why we use smoke? One more time?
Quiet them down.
It is calming. So two main purposes why we use it. So they work based off pheromones, and you have guard bees at the front of the hive that kind of are like your bouncers on the hive. And they basically can set off what's called an alarm pheromone, which funny smells like bananas. And that sets off the whole mood of the hive to be on guard. Also, what we use as natural beekeepers is typically like pine needles and things like that, which mimics the forest fire. So that lets everybody else know, hey, there's potential danger in the area, and they start guzzling lot of cute little bee butts down in the cells, worrying about consuming honey while we're doing our inspection. So it kind of serves two purposes. But basically, we use it as calming. This is a cute little smoker, very short-lived for inspection. But basically, when we come up to hives that are like this, we smoke what we call the entrance, which is their coming and going type location. Usually on these, they're a flat board. Sometimes we have like a little disc in the front. They can all look a little different. And then we'll put a little bit of smoke underneath the lid up at the top. Give them a moment to settle. And then we go ahead and we take off the lid and we do what's called an inspection from there. Yes, sir.
I'm familiar with beekeeping in Ohio, so we have a season for really bees. How's it work here? Do they keep going all year long, or do they go dormant?
So our season, I would say, is different than yours in the fact that we have the potential for things to be growing year round. Things still kind of wind down in the winter, I would say. We have our Brazilian pepper, which if we're lucky and it doesn't get wiped out by hurricane season with heavy winds, rains, flooding, then we catch that nectar flow usually before we go into winter. We don't have to button them up and overwinter like we would up north. We're certainly trying to still do inspections and maintain our bees, but we do preparation to head into winter because those bees typically live longer. Does that answer your question?
And the queen will keep laying all year long?
Yeah, not to the same extent that she's doing during nectar flow. We still have that seasonality where things will dial back, but we're not closing up that hive and saying, see you next spring. Yes, ma'am.
Just to tap on to the answer to that question, you all probably know this. In LaBelle, Curtis Honey, chatting with a fellow there, he told me that they started in Georgia, and they used to come down in the winter to Florida and then go back to Georgia. But their kids were starting school in Georgia and then graduating in Florida, so eventually some of them stayed in Florida.
So some of you may be seasonal, and beekeepers that are focusing on pollination are seasonal as well because they can still do those inspections in the winter. They can be treating, they can be artificially boosting that colony to be ready to catch the next nectar flow that those bees are shipped out to.
Regarding Curtis Honey and LaBelle, they've been around in Florida for a long, long time. The queen operation that they had up in the Carolinas, the beekeeping and hives and all that, 60 years ago I was working for them 25 cents a day. So, putting beehives in their pickup trucks. So they've been doing honey for like half time. But they did find the queen rearing and stuff, some of those things, they do operations up in the Carolinas. They are a Florida place, and that's where all the samples of the honey will be.
This is beeswax.
Sea grape.
I'm sorry, beeswax. Yeah, it's just melted down into a cube. But if you want to give it a smell,
But one of the
it has a very
brothers, Herschel, he's no longer making sea grape or coming out of Senegal, so as far as I know, if you know of a place where you can get sea grape, it would be nice, but I can't get sea grape anymore, you can't get it from Curtis Honey.
Any other questions? Anybody want to see any pure pictures?
How's the beeswax different from honeybees coming from?
So the beeswax is actually secreted by the bees. So everything, as we're looking at this, and the way that we manage our colonies, speaking of us three as beekeepers and how we typically guide our club, is we try to be more natural. So on these, if this picture, you can imagine this picture was not here, this would be a frame. Like we've done what's called a little starter strip, and we try to mimic what's happening in nature. So we allow them to build out that home on their own. So what you see here, if you come up and you look close, this is not attached in the corners or at the bottom. This is 100% made by bees. We had nothing to do with what was constructed right here in your eyes. So it takes a lot of resource, energy, nutrition to be able to pull this bee off. And we want to give them the opportunity to do that on their own, just so to kind of keep things out of their way. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. What was your question?
I was just asking, how do you get the honey out when it's just hanging like that?
So, yeah, so when we have, have what's called our supers. So if you imagine this had a box on top of it, we would put what's called an excluder. We keep the queen from moving up into the next box or chamber, however you want to think about it. And bees naturally want to keep honey above the brood. And so that's the only thing that they can store up here because the queen's not able to come up and lay. And so then we will then remove that box. And depending on if we gave them like foundation, that plastic insert, then you would be able to load it into an extractor, which is kind of like a fancy washing machine. It's the easiest way to describe it.
We do that, but I was wondering how do you do it when it's just hanging?
It's our Russian strain.
When it's just hanging, then you make a screw like an apple cider press. You can press and you put each individual fan in there and you crank it down and the water and has a spout and the honey comes out. So you can do it. And another reason for foundation list is to make honeycomb. Honeycomb, see, you couldn't do that if it had plastic in the center. And you really don't want to do it by buying wax from a supply house because it's recycled wax. It contains chemicals that aren't removed by heating. So if you let the bees make the whole product themselves, from beginning to end, with nothing but air to start with, the product is pure natural. This is the purest form of honey that you can get. It's so pure that once it was capped by the bees, it's never been touched by a human. It's never been uncapped. It's never been drained. It's never been stitched, bottled. So honeycomb is a very desirable product of honey for those that really, really want something. And you can chew and eat the wax and stuff all the time.
Are mites still a problem?
Mites, yes. Yes, so our primary concern is what's called varroa mites. And the best representation that we can think about is it'd be about the equivalent to carrying a dinner plate around on you. Typically, they go underneath the bee and they wedge themselves in between the fat bodies. And they live on the lymphatic secretions, the fat bodies. And they can vector diseases between the hives. So we talked about massive colony losses in 25, and that was primarily due to varroa, I believe was the bottom line that they came down to.
So if you think about what's the primary cause of complete colony collapse in honeybees, it's going to be the diseases that varroa mite vectors. The diseases are always present in the honeybee colonies, but when the mites are present, they spike the exposure because they're passing it around as they feed on the bees, right? So instead of having a couple bees that are sick, but they don't interact with each other, so they don't spread it, the mites are the vector between the bees to spread that disease. And what happens is they do attach and feed to the adult honeybees. The other part that they do is when that egg turns into a larva, it puts off a pheromone scent and says, I'm ready to cook. And then the other nurse bees will come over and they will cover it with that wax capping in about 8 days, right? The pheromone that larva set off to attract it getting covered by the worker bees also attracts the female fully pregnated varroa mite. She will go down in that cell. She has a little appendage on her that's like a snorkel. She will go into the back of the cell and she will submerge herself in that royal jelly. And just put her snorkel out so that she can still breathe. And she will hide in the back of that cell until it is capped over. Once it is capped over, she will feed on that larva and feed on that pupa and lay her eggs in there. She will lay about 5 more mites. The first one that she lays is a son. The next one she lays are all daughters. They are incestuous. The sons don't have stomachs. They don't have anything other than the purpose for reproduction. Will mate with their sisters and then die. And then when that baby hatches out, those baby varroa mites from that one mite that got in the back of that cell, one bee comes out as well as 4 fully mated varroa mites. So they're producing like crazy. And so if you don't control varroa mites, the disease will spread through the colony and it will kill them all.
What's the control for?
We as natural beekeepers use 2 primary sources. One is thymol, which comes from the thyme plant, not toxic, organic, safe for human consumption.
So we use that in our hives. The second thing that we use is oxalic acid. It's a natural acid found in spinach and things like that that you eat, regular fruits and vegetables. Very natural for the bees as well. And we use oxalic acid in a couple of different forms. It's a mechanical kill for the varroa mites, so they are unable to create a resistance to it. So it's very effective. The reason that you have big colony collapses last year was mostly among commercial beekeepers, and that's because they use chemicals produced by pharmaceutical companies to try to control varroa. They don't use the stuff that we use. They do now. Now it's a big deal. But back then they did not. So you had last year 70 to 80, sometimes 90% honeybee loss for commercial beekeepers. And my numbers last year were between 3 to 5%. So it's night and day. The way we do it, the way we teach it at our club is very effective, and also you can eat it. So he's 100% right. He's 1,000% right. Organic honey in the U.S., if it's U.S. produced, they can't put organic on the label. If you think about it, a honeybee colony from this point right here, if we let these bees out, nah, it was a bad idea. Bad idea. Jeff is like, don't do it, don't do it. I'm like, do it. You never know with me. So if we let them out, they would forage in a 2.5-mile radius around, right? So, and actually 2.5 miles from here in all directions, they would forage up to 5 miles. How could I possibly tell you what floral source they're on and whether or not it's an organic source? It's not possible. Anyone that tells you it's all organic honey, it is not. You buy something in the store and it says organic, if it makes you feel better to buy it that way, it's okay, but it's not. The reason you're able to see it is chances are if you see honey labeled as organic, look at where it's produced from. If it's produced outside the U.S. and shipped in, if that country deems it organic, it's allowed to say organic when it hits the U.S. But if it's produced in the U.S., it cannot say organic.
Be sold by USDA approved organic. Our USDA.
It is USDA approved.
USDA.
They're allowed to bring it in and put organic
But
on.
it's not our honey. They can't approve any of our honey, but they can approve any of the other honeys in the world according to the other country standards, which are more lax than ours. So they say, yeah, meet your country standards. But it's
No.
not meeting
It's just
our
something nice to put on the label, like a lot of that stuff. But probably the most important thing for you to pay attention to if you're buying honey and you really want the medicinal part of it, you want the nutritional part of it for yourself, is to look for two things. One is raw, and the other is local. Local honey that is produced in your area and that is available to you is 40% more bioactive than honey that's shipped from somewhere else. Because from the time it was pulled out to the time that it went to you is a much shorter time frame. So that's probably the freshest that you're going to possibly be able to get. You're not going to, if you had the choice, you would buy raw honey local. That's the best thing that you can do. Forget the label to say organic. And just know if it's getting shipped from Peru or Brazil in, that it's going to be great in putting your tea as a sweetener, but it has very little medicinal property. Floral sources that produced it are higher in mineral content. That's what changes the color of it.
And antioxidants.
So that's the difference in the two. And the other thing is just if you like the flavor of it. So it just depends on what you're doing with it. If you're taking honey for a health benefit, the best way to do that is to not heat it. So don't put it in a cup of very hot tea. That's going to kill off the enzymes. You don't want to store it with a metal spoon inside. The metal, when it interacts with the honey, also degrades those enzymes. The reason the enzymes are important is that when you take the enzymes which come from the honeybees themselves, right, that's from their body, glucose oxidase primarily is what we're talking about. When they mix that into the honey, when you take that honey and you mix it with water, there's a reaction that produces hydrogen peroxide at a low percentage. It's hydrogen peroxide. That's the reason that it helps you when you're sick. So if you want that benefit, don't heat it. Take a one scoop or 1 part raw, local, fully bioavailable honey. Mix it with 2 parts of water, not tap water with chlorine in it, but your good water. Mix that together, let it sit for 15 minutes roughly. That's going to take you from like a 3% hydrogen peroxide to like a 20% hydrogen peroxide. Then throw that back, right? You got a sore throat, you got an itchy throat, take that, gargle with it, swish around your mouth, swallow, and let it sit in the back of your throat. Does that make sense? But that's not gonna work the same way if you're talking about sooty honey and a teddy bear. And you squeeze their teeth. Not the same. Good?
We're probably gonna move on to the honey tasting portion of it, and the honey she was talking about, we're talking about some dark honey. This is some dark honey, and it has a different smell and a different taste, and she will let you taste this. Some people describe the taste as anise, licorice, molasses, sorghum, those type of tastes. So a lot of people that prefer this, when they taste that, they immediately say medicinal, because this is what people take for medicine, whereas the other variety she has, Tupelo, orange blossom, those are the drizzle on your buttermilk biscuits, the croissants. Those are flour, fragrant, sweet. This is not.
The only thing I want to touch on before you guys go is we are coming into swarm season. I don't know if anybody's ever seen bees clustered up on a tree, on a wall, things like that. They are typically not defensive in the city. Please do not be afraid. Spray them. Give them a chance to recoup and move on. Often they are just resting. You saw that queen. She has a big old body to fly around with. Sometimes she's the one that they need to stop and let her take a breather, and then they'll be on their way. Give them a moment before you need to call a beekeeper or get worried about the fact that they're resting around your home. So
Longer than 48 hours.
Yeah, 48 hours they should be gone.
Yeah, so when you see them collecting on the side of your house or they're dangling from a tree branch, give them a minute. Within 48 hours, 2 days usually, they are going to be moved on. If they're there longer than 48 hours, call one of us. Not in 6 months or a year when they're in your attic, but if they've been collected on the side of your house or hanging from a tree longer than 48 hours, give us a call. Much easier for us to move them before they set up shop and they're somewhere that you don't want them.
Also, day 3, 4, whatever.
All right, well, you guys are free to get up and come up and ask any questions to any of us and have at the honey tasting with Miss Virginia. She is a wealth of information when it comes to honey, so enjoy. Thank you for coming.